In 2008, a room full of the most financially literate people on the planet lost everything. Not to a street con, not to a Nigerian prince email, but to one man in a suit, in a Manhattan office. A man most of them had personally chosen to trust with their life savings. Judges, surgeons, Nobel Prize-nominated economists, people who spend their entire careers being paid to detect risk. If intelligence protected you from manipulation, none of them should have lost a single dollar. They lost billions. So here's the question this video is going to answer, using real neuroscience and real published research, not internet folklore. If smart people aren't protected, what is actually happening inside your brain in the moment you get taken advantage of? And more importantly, once you see the mechanism, can you ever be fooled by it the same way again? Stay with me. By the end of this, you're going to recognize a moment from your own life you didn't understand until right now. Here's the myth we've all absorbed. Scams happen to the lonely, the elderly, the uneducated. It's a comforting story, because it means it could never happen to you. It's also completely wrong. Fraud studies covered by Psychology Today found something almost insulting to our egos. Higher education and higher income are linked to larger fraud losses, not smaller ones. Not because smart people are gullible, because of something far stranger. Something built directly into how a healthy brain operates. If you've ever made a decision you were completely confident about, and it turned out to be the worst decision of that year, that feeling isn't a personal failure. It's a documented mechanism, and you're about to learn its name. To understand why intelligence doesn't protect you, we need one of the strangest case studies in the history of neuroscience. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Antonio Damasio studied a patient he called Elliot, who'd had a small amount of tissue removed from his ventromedial prefrontal cortex, a region right behind your forehead. Elliot's IQ was untouched. His memory, his logic, his ability to analyze a problem from every angle, all fully intact. But Elliot couldn't decide anything. Not big things, small things. What to eat, which pen to use. He could spend 45 minutes comparing two nearly identical options and still walk away with nothing decided. Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman described the mind as two systems. System 1 is fast, instinctive, emotional. System 2 is slow, effortful, logical, the part of you that feels like you. Here's the trap. The smarter and more successful you are, the more you trust System 2. You've been rewarded for logical thinking your entire life. Every promotion, every good grade, every deal you closed reinforced the same lesson. Trust your reasoning. Kahneman's research on overconfidence bias found this trust becomes dangerously miscalibrated. Confidence in a judgment and the actual accuracy of that judgment are far less connected than we assume. And the gap gets wider, not narrower, in people with high expertise and high self-regard. A brilliant mind builds such a strong track record of being right. It quietly stops checking itself. Manipulators, whether or not they've read a page of psychology, instinctively exploit this. They don't try to out-argue your logic. They hand your logic a story just complete enough to run with, and let your own confidence do the rest of the work for them. Let's go back to that room from the opening. When Bernie Madoff's fund collapsed, investigators found something the media largely missed. He almost never pursued people. He let them come to him, through referrals inside country clubs, synagogues, and charity boards. A closed, high-trust network of exactly the kind of people who'd built entire careers judging other people's credibility. That's not an accident. It's a documented pattern called affinity fraud, and research consistently shows it's most effective on high-status, highly networked people, because the social proof is doing the convincing, not the numbers. When your neighbor, your rabbi, your golf partner is already in, your brain doesn't run a fresh risk analysis. It borrows theirs. Kahneman would call this a System 1 shortcut disguised as System 2 due diligence. You feel like you're being rigorous. You're actually just trusting the room. Here's a related blind spot almost nobody names correctly. Expertise doesn't transfer across domains, but confidence does. A surgeon's steady hands in an operating room tell you nothing about their ability to evaluate a private equity pitch. A software engineer who can outcode almost anyone on Earth has zero specialized training in reading a con artist's timing. But the brain doesn't file confidence by category. If you're excellent in one high-status domain, that general feeling, "I'm someone who's good at this," quietly bleeds into completely unrelated decisions. Skilled manipulators pitch adjacent to your expertise, not inside a stranger's field where you'd naturally feel cautious, close enough to feel familiar, far enough that your actual competence doesn't apply. Now here's where the research gets uncomfortable, and where intelligence is proven to matter the least of anything we've covered. In 2013, psychologists Angela Book, Kimberly Costello, and Joseph Camilleri ran a study inside a maximum security Canadian penitentiary. Inmates were shown short, silent video clips, just strangers walking down a street. Nothing else. The inmates who scored highest on psychopathic personality traits were remarkably accurate at identifying which strangers were easiest to target. Not the poorest looking, not the weakest looking, the most exploitable, based purely on stride length, posture, and rhythm. This built on earlier research by Grayson and Stein back in 1981, who found the same pattern in a general population: nonverbal, involuntary signals of vulnerability, completely disconnected from intelligence, income, or education. Even Ted Bundy, one of the most exhaustively studied predators in criminal history, described selecting targets based purely on the way someone carried themselves down a street before a single word was ever exchanged. Security expert Gavin de Becker built an entire career around a related idea in his book, The Gift of Fear. Your body registers danger signals, what he calls pre-incident indicators, long before your conscious mind catches up. The tragedy is that intelligent, socially trained people are often the best at talking themselves out of that signal, because they've been taught since childhood that being polite matters more than being right. If you've ever ignored a bad feeling about someone because you didn't want to seem rude or paranoid or judgmental, that single override is the exact 2-second window a predator is counting on. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. It's not that smart. People miss the red flags. Research on financial fraud victims shows they usually see them: missing paperwork, vague explanations, evasive answers, and then talk themselves out of the very concern that could have saved them. This is confirmation bias at full strength, and it gets worse, not better, the sharper your mind is. A brilliant person can construct an airtight, sophisticated justification for almost anything, including the thing that's currently hurting them. The smarter you are, the more convincing your own cover story sounds, even when it's protecting the wrong conclusion. Robert Cialdini spent decades studying influence and found a small, repeatable set of psychological levers that override careful thinking in nearly everyone. Scarcity, authority, social proof. This offer is only available tonight. Only a few people even qualify for this. Success-driven people are uniquely vulnerable to the scarcity lever specifically, because being let in on something exclusive doesn't just offer an opportunity. It confirms an identity they've spent a career building. I'm one of the smart ones who gets it. There's a biological layer underneath this, too. Trust and bonding are chemically reinforced in the brain by oxytocin, the same neurochemical released during physical closeness, warm eye contact, and being told a flattering, vulnerable-sounding personal story. Skilled manipulators, deliberately or instinctively, use warmth, disclosure, and flattery early in an interaction specifically because it primes this trust chemistry, before your analytical brain has gathered enough information to justify that trust. Neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky's research on stress physiology adds the final piece. Under time pressure, cortisol rises, and the brain's slower, more deliberate reasoning system gets deprioritized in favor of fast, instinctive responses. This made evolutionary sense when the threat was a predator. It's a liability when the urgency is manufactured by a person on the other end of a phone call. That's precisely why manipulative pitches, romantic, financial, professional, arrive wrapped in artificial urgency. I need an answer tonight. This window closes in an hour. It's not a coincidence. It's a documented mechanism for shutting off your most careful thinking exactly when you need it most. So if intelligence isn't the shield, what is? Psychologist Daniel Goleman found that IQ predicts far less of real-world success and safety than we assume. What actually separates people who get manipulated from people who don't is closer to emotional intelligence. The discipline of noticing a gut-level unease and treating it as data instead of noise. Here is the actual toolkit, backed by research rather than intuition. First, reinstate the pause. Harvard research on decision-making recommends something called a pre-mortem. Before saying yes to anything significant, spend 5 minutes imagining it has already failed and ask yourself exactly why. This single habit interrupts the overconfidence loop that got exploited in the first place. Second, treat manufactured urgency itself as the red flag, not a reason to skip your own diligence. A legitimate opportunity survives you sleeping on it. A manipulated one cannot. Third, and this is the one confident, high-achieving people resist hardest, deliberately invite disagreement before deciding. Harvard Business School researcher Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety found that people who actively seek out dissenting opinions catch dramatically more blind spots than people who trust their own judgment alone. Not because someone else is smarter than you, because they're standing outside the exact confidence loop currently working against you. Fourth, when your stomach tightens, your shoulders rise, or you feel a small, illogical urge to leave a conversation, don't argue yourself out of it before you've even named it. Based on Damasio's research, that's an older, faster part of your brain that's already run the numbers. The uncomfortable truth in all of this research isn't that intelligence is worthless. It's that intelligence was never the shield we assumed it was. The real shield is awareness of the exact mechanism being used on you, recognized in the moment it's happening, before your own mind finishes building the explanation that lets it through. If something in this video just reframed a moment from your own life, a deal, a relationship, a decision you talked yourself into against every instinct you had, that recognition is the entire reason this channel exists. Subscribe. Because next, we're breaking down the exact scripted first 90 seconds con artists use to build false trust, word for word, tactic by tactic, so you can spot every single one of them before they finish their opening line.